Art versus the artist. And where do we draw the line? This is I Have No Title and I Must Podcast, the show where we discuss any and all aspects of pop culture. We are your hosts, Tyler
and Chris.
And today's episode came about from something Chris said a couple episodes back. But the concept itself is something I've thought about often. And I'm sure to some degree, whether conscious or subconscious, I think everyone thinks about this. But it's not always an easy answer. So we're going to talk about that today.
Controversy.
What are some of the first things that come to your mind?
I think the biggest lightning rod, maybe two, that will stand in perpetuity today. I'll go ahead and... How far into this are we? A minute? Add the music in, maybe a minute? Okay, good. We're past at least the 30-second mark. William Cosby... PhD, apparently. That's so I'm told. And Michael Jackson. These are two very different cases, though, because one of them was proven guilty in a court of law and the other was proven innocent. And one of them had like 40 accusers, and one of them had a couple of accusers that one accuser, at least I think, has admitted they lied. One accuser waited until the day, or two accusers, I think, or two supporters, rather, who supported him in court, waited until the day after the statute of limitations for perjury and recanted to go on a publicity tour and write a book. And this is heavily documented. A lot of their stories do not line up. Stuff with Bill Cosby, ouch. That's rough. So, but he's created some of the most wholesome content for children and families the world has ever known.
Yeah, for me, that's a little bit easier to pass on because I never really watched The Cosby Show.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked his stand-up. I thought it was pretty funny, but...
Carlos Mencia really liked it.
Yeah. But I think Michael Jackson's the harder one because his music is undeniably great.
Yeah.
You know, some duds. Everyone has them, but... That and, you know, is it proven? Is it not proven? So where's the line there? And why aren't we looking at the parents, too, on that one? Like, who says, sure, I'll just let my kids stay at some random person's house?
That does come out. That does come up a lot. And on some of these trips, the parents were present. Yeah. Not obviously on some of the trips where they had, like, sleepovers or whatever.
I mean, don't get me wrong. If Michael Jackson did what he did, that guy. But at the same time, he didn't go pick these kids up off the street.
No, yeah. It was a relationship with the families more often than not. There's a lot of documentaries out there, and every single one of them is slanted. Every single one of them has a point of view, whether it goes in favor of Michael Jackson or against him. The problem therein lies with the fact-checking. When you get one that is attempting to be as unbiased as it can be, where is that line of, like, how much truth did these guys tell? And you have to look at the details. Like, why didn't, if they really believe this, why didn't they say so then? Why wait until the most opportune moment for you? And other details like being snubbed and things like that in other capacities. Okay, I don't want to get too bogged down in, like, Michael Jackson territory because there's other people like, which Dave Chappelle talks about this a lot too. And therein is someone who I think you cannot separate the art from the artist because he is intrinsically one and the same.
Well, that's one of the things I was wanting to point out, because if you've got something like a comedian or a solo musician or, any other solo projected artist, that's a little bit easier to find where that line is, because if you don't like that person, just don't listen to their stuff. Don't buy their pieces. But where does it come in with, like, actors and their movies? Because, yes, they're doing terrible things, but if the art's good, everybody else that works on that piece suffers. But it's not just them. It's like you got the writers, the directors, the supporting actors, like down to every last extra, So...
Yeah, I think a good example with that is somebody who's just not a criminal, so far as we know, but just a dick, which by all accounts is Joss Whedon, who's created some of the most beloved fantasy, sci-fi, horror, like comic book oriented stuff in the past 20, 30 years with Buffy, Firefly, right?
Yeah.
That's, it got one season and everybody raves over it. And they get mad at me to this day because I haven't watched it. And I'm like, I don't want to get sucked into something and then be let down by the end of it. It's like Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah.
Like, it got canceled and it had a huge thing it was going into in the cliffhanger ending. So that, to me, is even more dicey because it's like he's mean to women. He cheats on his wife. He disproportionately unfair to people on the sets. And a lot of that has come out since then. I think it was Charisma Carpenter. He made like comments to her about her being pregnant when she was pregnant. Again, I wasn't there, but when stuff stacks up,
Yeah.
it really, that becomes a case of like, ugh, I feel bad for the people who have to work with him. I feel worse about some of the people who have to work with R. Kelly, but different scenario. So, and it's like, what was it like to work with, Bill Cosby? Did it feel dangerous? Ominous? I wasn't there. I don't know. So, who do you want to focus on for? Because there's a big one that I have not mentioned by name, but I will. There's even more evidence dropped yesterday about this one particular person that from the other side that vindicates this person, which we can get to later once everybody's listened for a while and we get that sweet content.
Well, one of the things I was wanting to talk about is, if you look hard enough at anybody, especially through different lenses, like what's acceptable today, what was acceptable then, you're going to have to figure out, what that means as far as consuming the art. But one that comes to my mind is Roman Polanski, because Chinatown is one of the greatest movies of all time. Why do I say that? Because if I told you the plot of Chinatown, you'd be like, that sounds boring as hell. How is that the greatest movie of all time? That's why it's so good, because Roman Polanski made me care about this stupid plot. It's just a private detective investigating a dispute over water rights. But yet the movie is so fantastic. But Roman Polanski is, undoubtedly like a piece of shit. Like, what all comes against him? Like, was there charge of assault?
I think it's like statutory because, to be clear, there is a difference between, and I'm just saying, like, murder's not murder. There's murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree. Sometimes you can even, we can decide that it was manslaughter by adjudication of how you perceive something to have happened. So when somebody agrees, if it's underage, that's considered no matter what, even if the person says, like, comes out and comes into the courtroom and says, I agreed to this is wrong, this person didn't know how old I was. And I think that's exactly what happened there with him. And the woman to this day says, like, yeah, it was, like, not a big deal.
Yeah.
So,
But
I'm just saying,
everything else he has done. Because, like, even from the sets of...
yeah, because he murdered those people, didn't he? With Charles Manson?
I don't know.
Okay, well.
But I know he was, like...
Allegedly. Roman Polanski, I just want you to know, this is all Tyler's idea. Allegedly.
But I know he was, like, Josh Whedon territory to the female talent on... I know especially, like, Chinatown and a bunch of horror stories coming out of that, but... So, yeah, where do you draw the line? Do we not watch Chinatown anymore? Or do we keep watching Chinatown and just not watch any of his new stuff?
Yeah, because nobody mentions that. And that's where you draw the line, is like, how good is it? And I think that's what Dave Chappelle has had this. He talks about this, Thriller versus R. Kelly. Or not Thriller versus R, but Michael Jackson versus R. Kelly. Like, one of them definitely did that. The other one, it kind of looks worse for because he was crazy, allegedly. I mean, that's, and that stems from a lot of stuff with Michael Jackson's dad, like being verbally abusive to him, most likely physically abusive to him, and probably all the kids, but none as bad as Michael because they knew he was the star. So they worked him like a dog and were mentally abusive to this kid who didn't use his real voice, continued to hack away at his face, and until he almost had no nose left. Developed, this is something too, like, people still, he was like this mythical being that it's like a Sasquatch or a Yeti or the Mothman or something. You're like, the Mothman is actually real, but it's just this thing that, like, goes away into the whatever. Yeah, they say it's got giant red eyes, but those are just goggles. It wears goggles. Like, There's photos of Michael Jackson developing vitiligo. People saying like, yeah, it was a thing. And then other people are still like, nah, he was bleaching his skin. Oh, I didn't know that was a thing that black people could do. Or, I mean, when I was young, it's like, really? He goes like progressively lighter. Then he has assistants and like medical professionals that come out years later that were like, yeah, at first when it started worsening, we covered that. We covered it up with his original skin tone. And then after a point, it was impossible to do that. So we just leaned into the lighter skin.
Didn't they say something that the makeup that they were using was actually making it worse?
I never heard that.
I don't know.
But
But I was thinking that was the case. They were originally trying to cover up so that he had his original skin tone. But then the makeup that he was using was actually making was it Verta something?
Vitiligo?
Yeah. Vitiligo. Like worsen. Like I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, proceed.
So yeah, we judge people based on, it's like I think we're more likely to, a lot of people are more likely to forgive R. Kelly. And now we live in, just because, let me fight my ADHD. I wanted to skip on, but I think we're more likely to forgive R. Kelly in this day and age because he seems like more of a normal guy. That's just, this eccentric weirdo that makes good R&B music. That's from, if you like it, that's what your perspective is. Like, yeah, he did that stuff, but, Ignition, right? I Believe I Can Fly, right? So, with Michael, eccentric weirdo, but like mythical standards, eccentric weirdo, wore black surgical mask 30 years before it would become trendy and popular or necessary. Like now he would just blend in. Dressed like he was in the Beatles, again, 30 years too late. Did not look, in every way began to not look like the ethnicity that he was, but was. And that's not necessarily his fault. I think there was some resentment with his dad, but I cannot diagnose or begin to assess Michael Jackson's mental state. All I can tell you is what I grew up watching because he was the biggest star on the planet, be it acting or otherwise, because he was in enough things as an actor that we have to recognize him as an actor, and he transcended music. It's like you think of him as a music person, but he also is more so, I think, in some circles, known for his dancing and choreography. So after a certain point, there's like a statute of limitations on what we'll feel bad about. I think that's one of the lines too. Did it come out like, was there a founding father they found bodies of in their basement? Was it Benjamin Franklin?
I don't know if that's just,
or was that like an urban?
I still don't know if that's like urban legend or if it's just like, we don't know if he's the one that did it.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is because there's so much time. But like, let's just say let's just say James K. Polk. I'm just using him as a very random example because it's not going to piss anybody off. Because if I see, Abraham Lincoln, they'd be like, don't you dirty his name. Okay.
So, I mean, you can't dirty James K. Polk either because the high school in Ned's Declassified was named after him. Or is it middle school? They were middle school.
I think it was never mind.
Yeah,
I was
anyway.
going to make just piss off my people. Anyway, so with the joke I was going for there. They have a special mode of transportation, but no, calm down, guys. I'm talking on my turf now. So anyway, let's just say hypothetical situation, allegedly, whatever legal terms. James K. Polk had like some ancestral home, and after he died, nobody lived in it. They turned it into a museum. And then they had undeniable evidence that it was him that killed these people, and he's got them buried in the sub-basement or whatever. And let's just say James K. Polk was actually more important than he is, like founding like George Washington status or Mount Rushmore status. Would we care? Like, at this point? Like, let's just say also that it turned out that, I don't know, Salvador Dali, like, some people or something. Now, I'm not diminishing the horrific nature of that crime, but Now, it's very possible that, based on the time frame he existed in, that the victims could still be alive. Where do we stand? Do we take down all those paintings? I think there's like a time, and I'm not saying one way or another, this is good or this is bad or this is what I would do, because then there definitely would be a conflicted nature on my part. If it's your favorite thing, it definitely, for some people, they might legitimately be able to say, I wouldn't care. It just doesn't make any difference to me. I'll still enjoy it the same way. It would definitely make me conflicted. Every time I'd look at that, I'd be like, ugh, why'd you have to be so good at painting or whatever? Why did Michael Jackson have to be so good at singing and dancing and so good at being weird that people were going to misunderstand that the things that happened, or find himself in a precarious situation that, like, let's say the court, the jury, and all the documentaries defending him are correct. Then what happened is the parents of these children and the children themselves decided, we're going to take advantage of this guy for being weird and, like, let's just say generously not knowing boundaries. Maybe he didn't go as far as what some people claim that he did, and is definitely what's in people's minds, but was inappropriate. People accusing him and the benefit of the doubt, and just give him that, because I could see that makes sense to me. And then they overblew it and said, like, he straight up did terrible things to these kids. Then the true victim really is Michael Jackson in that situation. But we'll never know 100% for sure. So it taints that forever in your mind. At least for some people, they'll view him as the victim. I feel like I've stayed on the same few people for a while. Somebody else like Bill Cosby. I did grow up watching The Cosby Show. It was on every night, like twice a night for a long time, and I remember watching that consistently for what seemed like a long time. Could have been one summer, and I was like 7 or 8, and it had a impact on me. But that's one that feels like a betrayal, because, for a lot of people, it's like, whether they wanted, some people just never really liked him or got him or whatever. I wasn't like a mega fan, but I remember we had a VHS of Bill Cosby himself. So there was a time in my life where I knew that special very well.
Yeah.
Finding out about that, I hadn't really paid much attention or thought about Bill Cosby in years and years, maybe even a decade, when this came out, and it just felt like a slap in the face to everyone who would look up to that. And it's in living, like, he's still alive, and there are still supporters saying it was a frame up, because nothing is real in this day and age where there's too much information. We're inundated, like Huxley's idea of the future. We're inundated with too much information. It's, instead of just watching the news at night at 11, it's 24 hours a day if you want it, and you can flip from station to station and get your own personal slant on what you want to hear as the news. So
I blame Twitter, or what is it, X now? It's like, because every day it's just like, oh, so-and-so said something racist or sexist or homophobic on the Twitter. It's like, God damn it. Could you people just not get on the internet?
Or say, in James Gunn's situation, inappropriate jokes now that were made 10, 15 years ago and got him fired from his job, from making really good films. The only films, like the standout films that should have been failures for Marvel, like Thor 2, building on like what Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor 1, created, and then sucked. And then Guardians of the Galaxy. The is Guardians of the Galaxy, or even like, so really fringe comic book fans know about Guardians of the Galaxy. Now everybody knows Guardians of the Galaxy. Like 7-year-old kids that have never touched a comic book have a t-shirt with Groot on it. You have a t-shirt with Groot on it, don't you? And, well, I mean, comics from way back. It's not like you became a Guardians fan then. Maybe, I'm sure you at least had a passing knowledge of them.
I might not have been a fan before, but I know who they were.
Yeah. And he comes along and like reimagines this cast of characters into one of the better films, better standing trilogies now in Marvel. Amazing storyteller. And so much so, DC poached him, and it was an easy thing to do because Marvel up! Get bleeped anyway, so it doesn't matter if I blew out the microphone.
Well, that's another thing that I think needs to be pointed out. Things that you said in the past, but have grown out. At what point do we forgive? Because, it might not have been like outright racist or anything intentionally bad, but I'm sure there's things that you've done 10, 20 years ago that you're like, oh man, that's not even the same person anymore.
Yeah, I did things last week that I feel that way about.
Yeah, someone asked me that question. It's like,
There's things I said on the last podcast. There was that one podcast. Guys, come on. We were just playing around. We love Star Wars and we love you. So if you could go back to that video just for 2 seconds and click like instead of dislike, that'd be great. Thanks. Also click like on this one, share and subscribe.
but anyway, yeah, at what point do we forgive? Because again, people grow. I think people should be allowed to grow, because especially when certain things are like in the common vernacular and you just don't think about it or the ramifications of like what you're saying, because it's everywhere. Not that you even mean it derogatory, but
Well, it's so hard to keep up these days,
Yeah.
too, because what used to be a clinical term will now be considered a slur.
yeah.
And I'm not talking about a racial slur. I'm talking about like what we'll consider. And I had this, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is like with people on the spectrum, autistic people, the people I count myself, and if you're a new viewer, that's me. So I'm speaking from not long history, not long experience with knowing about myself, but at least feeling that way. So there was a time when the word was just the term. You would just say like mentally in front of it, and that's what kept it. And we might even have to bleep that. I don't know. I'm bleep half the things I say in this episode. People have to read a transcript or something. But if you said like, that would be acceptable or handicapped. And there's this movie, I can't remember if I've mentioned it several times. There's this, I don't know about on the air, but I've talked to people recently about it because I recently rewatched it. It's David Duchovny wrote and directed it. It's with Robin Williams. It's called House of D. Anton Yelchin plays David Duchovny's character when he's younger. David Duchovny plays him when he's older. It's a great indie type film. Robin Williams plays a mentally challenged person that Anton Yelchin's character was friends with when he was younger. Best friends with, in fact. And when he goes to see him when they're older, he talks about that he's always changing. And they're like, how so? And I think this is just a bit of commentary from David Duchovny on, if I may be so bold, just the evolution of language. As simple as that. Not even necessarily criticizing it, just pointing out that sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it might be ridiculous. I don't know, but that's the impression I got, because he went through all the stages of what it's acceptable to call someone who's on the autism spectrum. And now even Asperger's, a lot of people don't want to use that term because of that guy's involvement with the Nazis, even though or his views on those people, even though there was some discoveries made. I didn't know about that until recently. I guess that's just how much people don't want to talk about it. I didn't know about that. So could you imagine somebody who was frozen in a time capsule, not racist, liberal, open-minded, but they wake up in 2024, they would sound like Joseph Goebbels or something, like from just their terminology standpoint when they're trying. Patton Oswalt has a great bit on this about like, I'm not going to do it, but look it up. I'm sure there's a 5-minute
Is that the one where he's talking about being politically correct, but...
Yeah, there's 2 examples of like saying, like, leave those guys alone. They're just... But he uses bad terminology. And it's like an open-minded person who's trying to be protective, I think, of gay people. And then the other guy who, like, sounds nice, but means the worst things. That's what we have to pay attention to. Not virtue signaling, but what's somebody really telling you?
Yeah.
And in this day and age of, like, I don't want to say what people have been like fake news or whatever, but there's a lot of people who won't tell you exactly what they mean, and you do have to look for those context clues.
That's a good point, because that's probably the most unbelievable part about Captain America. If we unfroze him now, he would be canceled. He would not be the savior that he's been portrayed as, just because of what he would say.
Just the time differences and what was acceptable versus how people just generally spoke. Because I don't necessarily like the hard idea of that everybody from a certain point, before a certain point, was racist. Because there were people who literally fought a war for the freedom of other people. And there were white people who helped in the Underground Railroad. That was to facilitate the movement of these people. Some of the people were in relationships with them to help facilitate this. So there's been interracial relationships from time immemorial. Some people are just always racist. And some people are like, what? Humans are humans. And I'm not going to say they don't see race. Maybe they do see race. Maybe they just appreciate the differences. I appreciate that there's some people I can't stand. I work with him every day. I do not appreciate the differences between us. But culturally, there's people in other races, other cultures that you can find, like the art, food, the music that is intrinsic to that other culture that I can't appreciate. Maybe we wouldn't be best friends. Maybe we would be when I met them. But that's a different situation. And given how things stand now with we have to judge you based on exactly what you say, not even necessarily how you're saying it, because satire is in danger of not existing.
Yeah, and sarcasm. But I think we also have to look at certain people through the lenses that other people have put them under. Are you familiar with Sam Cooke?
Yeah.
For anyone that's not, like his career spans early 50s to about the mid 60s. He pretty much inspired every soul and R&B singer that has came after him. Everything he wrote was a hit. And if you've not listened to his music, highly recommend. But at the time, this was before the civil rights movement had started up and was in full swing, and his death was about the middle of it. But this was a black man in the 50s and 60s, wrote his own music. Everything he wrote was a hit. Record company knew this. They didn't have the power, he did. Of course, record company owned by a white racist. So I believe they had him killed. And so if anyone asks, it's like, oh, what's the one conspiracy theory you believe? It's this one. Because the official statement is he had some kind of altercation with the date he had at this hotel, and that it got physical, and the hotel receptionist or whatever she was shot and killed in self-defense. That's what it is. And everyone that corroborated it, one person wasn't even there. They're like, oh, I was on the phone when this went down. So you weren't even there. You were supposedly on the other end of a phone line. And from all other reports, the state of his body is not conducive to one single gunshot wound. Like someone roughed him up before he was killed. And just the size of the person accused of shooting him would not physically be able to do that. And so there's so much things that show him as this not happen. So I believe the record company had him killed. So it's like, do we look at his career in music through the lens of violence against women and assaulting them and being killed in a self-defense, therefore put a mark on all of his work? Or do we dig a little deeper and overlook that, find the truth, and move on?
I think that's an excellent point to segue into the unnamed individual from the top. If you were still wondering, I am of course referring the elephant in the room, or the man who would most likely be seen riding an elephant, Jonathan Christopher Depp II. Yes, just yesterday, the man he sued bleep that. AH. He sued AH in America, in a place where he could actually get the truth to be heard, because that's all he wanted. He didn't even care about winning. He just wanted the court of public opinion to know. I'm sure he did want to win, because that would have been even rougher and worse because now he can actually say, yeah, a jury believed me too. But everybody saw that. Everybody saw the performance on the stand. Some people would be like, it was a toxic relationship. Yeah, when a person cuts your finger off, yeah, not hers, by the way, his. And at the time, he was clearly doing things to protect her, to hide things that she was doing to him. This is indeed possible, because there are some men in the world who do refuse to fight back or hit certain people, and they'll just take whatever is given to them. And when you're used to being in, well, he hasn't, I don't know all of his history, but he talked about being abused from when he was a kid. And sometimes you just don't want to run away. He'd also cashed in. He f***ed up and cashed in his marriage and to be with this woman, because she was clearly a narcissist, allegedly. She was at least diagnosed with histrionic disorder. So, allegedly. And so there you have it. Everybody saw that. I watched this court case very closely. It was easily certain of the things did not line up that she wanted to line up. Even something as simple as the makeup. They wanted to use the makeup as some magic bullet, for JFK. This is the makeup case. And even the makeup company was like, yeah, we didn't make that back then. So, don't know what you're talking about, but it's a bunch of bullshit. I'm not going to go through all the finer points of this. Suffice it to say, essentially, he did win that case.
Hearsay.
And with the court of public opinion, it was just making fun of AH because her performance, and I will call it that, on the stand was laughable. Some of the things that she was doing, you know, mugging for the camera, talking directly to the jury. I'm not going to say in an intimidating manner, but it was attempting to garner some sort of sympathy. It's obvious. You can watch any breakdown of key moments if you want. Now, that was America. What really kicked all of this off was several years earlier, he got fired from Fantastic Beasts, the Harry Potter sequel franchise. And even one of the top individuals in charge of that looked at evidence and said, like, I've heard some allegations, I've seen some things, I stand by Johnny Depp. We know things that you don't, but we can't go public with them, or we don't want to. I think there's still some evidence against AH that just they can't say for legal reasons. Whatever that is, I couldn't say. That's speculation, but people seem to dance around certain topics for legal reasons, and that's, some people know what they're doing. The person, I think they worked for The Sun, or there's so many tabloids in England, like, they're where they get their news. It really is fake news there, because they have these tabloids that are obviously written with such biased slants, and they just slander each other back and forth, and they can do it with impunity for whatever reason. So he made this headline like Johnny Depp wife beater or whatever. He became very close with AH, and now I think he was involved in a podcast or something. So that person who wrote that article that kicked off the whole thing and got Johnny fired from Fantastic Beasts, which led to him getting fired from Pirates of the Caribbean, which led to a whole dominoes of people either boycotting him or, you know, it slanderized his name. Well, slander and libel. It was in print and in verbal. That guy is the one who Johnny sued in England, where they have a completely different legal system, so a lot of stuff was just decided behind closed doors. Also, feel free to look any and all of this up. Amber Heard got to spend a considerable time with the judge, gave her case, and they came out and said, we believe her. Slurp. So, Johnny pursued his case here in America to try and get as much information out, because that case was not public. He wanted this televised. He wanted people to see them, for better or for worse. Like him saying, yeah, I'm a mess, but I didn't do this. And she said, I'm perfect, allegedly, and I didn't do that or anything that you can imagine. I mean, it's all right there. Like, it's all 20 hours or whatever of it is still on YouTube, of all places. You don't even have to look hard to find it. Like, this is all in color and easy to listen to. There are transcripts. It's all right there. So the guy, just yesterday, I mean, yesterday is when I saw it and it was fresh. So it was either yesterday morning or Tuesday night, and only hit the internet to be chopped up yesterday morning into smaller clips. The guy who wrote that article in England, who Johnny Depp originally sued, apologized publicly to Johnny Depp, not in print, with his mouth. I'll let that speak for itself. He would not say anything against AH because he's smart and he knows he can't do that. He just said, I get what happened. It didn't exactly happen to me, but I see the big picture now, and I owe Jonathan Christopher Depp II an apology. Whoopsie daisy. Sorry for f***ing your life up. But, these things happen. We all get taken in by a narcissist once in a while, right, guys? You all had that happen. Where, like, a 25-year-old blonde narcissist comes into the room on, like, speed or MDMA or something and is, like, telling you this story. And one thing leads to another, and then you f*** up a guy's career, even though he's like one of the premier character actors in the world. Like, we've all had that happen to us, right? I can just say I'm sorry, and it makes it all go away. So what happens with Johnny now? He's still doing what are effectively big budget indie films. He's doing like, I don't know, like mafia stuff or some historical pick where he plays some dictator. Is it too little too late? Is he that, in some people's minds, nobody looks at this stuff like I do. Not everybody. Not everybody, if you look on, it's like maybe some of these videos have 1,000 likes. And then maybe 2,000 views. But there's literally 8 billion people on the planet. So some people, if you say Johnny Depp, they're going to be like, oh, I loved him in Edward Scissorhands. That was great. And you'd be like, how do you feel about, the whole thing? And they're like, what whole thing? Oh, okay, good. So you don't watch the internet and the news and stuff. And they're like, nah, I really don't pay attention to celebrity gossip or news. Great. Another person might be like, it's like he hits women. But they, like, a jury agreed, kind of didn't. Well, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? So that's the thing. Like, you can't unring a bell. It's always going to be there. And then you have to make the conscious decision I think it's really incumbent of all of us to look at things objectively and be careful with what we say and how we say it. Sometimes I throw around things too loosely, but we're just playing around here. This is just a debate, a friendly discussion about this very broad, controversial topic. What AH does or doesn't do, I don't really care, but this brought about so much misery for so many people. And I mean, he got MRSA from like that almost chopping his finger off, and he had to have it like reattached. They had to look for his finger. Look this up. Yeah. If you don't know about this, just look it up. They had to reattach it, and it's permanently screwed up. He got MRSA from it. That can kill you. Imagine that story. Like, Johnny Depp got drunk and accidentally cut his finger off and contracted MRSA and died. Weird how that happened, right? Yeah, what? Yeah, and like, my dog stepped on a bee that day? What are you even talking about?
Yeah, that's one thing I never understood about all that. Johnny Depp was fired, name dragged through the mud over unsubstantiated claims. Yet Ezra Miller is still put front and center on all of the projects he's working on, even though we have proof he did worse things.
On camera, he's done these things. And like as if he's holding up his ID and today's newspaper with like, while strangling someone who said, hey, can I have your autograph? I'm sorry, Ezra, I'm sorry. I loved you in The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Yeah, that's insane. And Jonathan Majors now is just looking on like, what? Ezra, can we talk in private? In public. Oh, that doesn't matter either. Okay. You'll strangle anyone. Allegedly.
Yeah.
I kept my eye on you, Ezra. Yes, that's insane.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going on with that. I mean, what was hilarious, though, were the memes that followed those events. Like, and here's Ezra living his best life, or just walking around a free man, looking like Prince and Willy Wonka mixed together, doing whatever. Just a strangling fool, allegedly. Actually, I don't know if you can say allegedly. If it's on camera and that's clearly him, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm pretty sure he looks directly into the camera and says, my name is Ezra Miller and I like to,
today's date is,
I'm not going to go that far, but the other, like the worst stuff that I don't even want to get into with this guy is bad. Like the drug stuff, the cultish stuff, the people he kidnapped stuff, not kidnapped, but maybe they came with him willingly, but then one thing led to another and they're just like disassociated from their family. If you don't know about this, yet again, I don't want to give everybody homework. Don't look that one up. Just don't do it. It's out there. If your interest is that piqued, go ahead, but it's really sad because he's clearly mentally unstable, and I don't want to make too much light of that, but what I'm not making light of anybody being unstable, because we've all had like mental incapacities to some degree.
But if you need help, get the help. No one's going to fault you for getting the help.
Yeah.
And the people that do, you don't need them.
What I'm making light of is
everyone's reaction.
Yes, how society has treated this. Like, we didn't hold him accountable at all, which clearly he doesn't need to be in jail. He needs to be in a facility receiving treatment. Well, who knows? Well, I sometimes think back on The Flash and I'm like, some of those acting choices were like perfect. Like, he can be funny. He was playing two different roles and I think he played them well given what he had. That's the thing is like, if I take the time to separate all of that, the goal of this video is to see where we can draw the line. Even after everything, I still wanted to go see The Flash. I saw it in the theater. That was crazy. To think that that's even possible to do. And they buried Batwoman because it might be a little bad. Like, did you guys see Jonah Hex and Green Lantern? You release those with gusto, but then you won't put out a Batwoman. You like finish it, but nope, we're gonna just tax right off that one, allegedly. And yeah, I mentioned Jonathan Majors, the most recent case in all of this. Now here's the thing. Again, that ringing of the bell, the things that I have read or heard I'm ignoring the current case. I'm saying I read and heard, and this is all speculation. It's all third, fourth, fifth party on down the line, is that he is also either a sociopath or a textbook narcissist, that he's given people a hard time along the way, that he's difficult to work with. I've also heard the opposite. Which one's true? I don't know. I don't know him. What I do know is that one way or another, he was smart enough to try and get away from this woman who was going to cause him a problem. He's on camera running away from her. And yet, that's what the evidence shows. What else can I say? The woman fled. The woman now, like, she left the country or whatever because she did not want to show up for any kind of litigation. I don't know what her whereabouts or status are. I just know that that is what happened. Looked bad for her. It felt like a vindication for Jonathan Majors because she doesn't have to answer any tough questions. And still, the thing that he was... I didn't put this down for research. I forgot about this particular case. The thing that he actually... People misunderstand what he actually got convicted of, but he did... That's still... Like, when that happens, he lost a lot of deals, and that's a permanent black mark on his record. That's what people are going to think of first, is that he had, in this case, he was convicted. Johnny Depp didn't win. Like, people remember him winning too, but it was enough. They tried to be fair or whatever to AH. It was like 95%. So it was enough to say, yeah, jury agreed with him. They just didn't give him everything. Also, I don't think she has paid those charities that she had promised the money to. Or pledged.
Aquaman money, though. She's got to be bringing it in.
Yeah, that first one made like $1 billion, but I don't know how much she was actually even in the second one.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard the only reason she was in the second one is because Elon Musk pulled some strings.
I've heard that too, because I've heard they cut her substantially and that it was shocking that she was even still in the movie. Yet again, like, the jury decided these things. Like, she lost, like, unequivocally, she did lose more than Johnny Depp won. But she wasn't she was allowed to stay in that. But that same company, Warner Brothers, fired him completely from nothing, from hearsay, from a tabloid report. That's too much. So there are some double standards. Now we haven't talked about, like, I don't want to victim shame or blame or anything like that. In fact, quite the opposite, because I want to make sure people feel confident and safe enough to come forward with claims if they need to. More often than not, this is a rare occurrence. People don't come forward, and sometimes people come forward anonymously and want to remain anonymous when they have a legit claim like this. This is like voter fraud. It is extremely rare. People make a bigger deal about it than it actually is, because it is very rare, this type of fraud. Having said that, it does happen. Narcissists are real. Psychopaths are real. Psychopaths live amongst us all the time. They just don't murder, like, in the headlines. It's just usually they make bad jokes and have this superiority complex and make you feel bad at work. And you're like, I wonder if that guy's a psychopath. It's like, he very, very well could be. They're just not all murderers.
No, they'll destroy your life in other ways.
They're all potentially murderers. Then again, that's anybody, allegedly. So, I mean, with Jonathan Majors, it looks like all of the evidence pointed to he didn't do what they said he did, clearly, and that he did what he said he did. Tried to get away from this crazy woman, allegedly. And we should have more legal talks, as I feel in danger here constantly from just discussing these public matters that are not even up for debate. That's like, it's on camera. if someone was chasing me down this, if I was like pushed somebody away and ran away from them and then got convicted of doing something bad to them, I would definitely be like, what's wrong with our legal system? And the thing is, the ramification of that is that's what people will remember. They're not going to look up the legalese of what it actually was for. So, yeah, another big case which I just want to make sure people should feel safe. I want to clarify. Don't want to victim shame or blame. If you have a case, you should come forward. Don't do this. Don't sit in the shadows because somebody, and this is why talking about somebody like AH, Johnny Depp's accuser, is really important, because those cases, you should be like advocates for women or male victims too, because male victims get shut down too. Just look at Terry Crews, who come forward with claims.
And Brendan Fraser, blacklisted.
Yes, blacklisted for years. That somebody like AH damages all of us because it makes people less likely to believe, makes people more likely to victim blame and say like, well, maybe that did happen to you, but who cares? Or maybe you're lying to me like AH, who clearly just made things up or exaggerated events into something that they weren't. Did he get mad and wreck his houses? I'd say he probably did. He's on camera doing that. What he's not on camera doing is hitting a person. And also, I want to remind anybody who saw that 30-second clip of her smirking at the end of it when she like hid her camera, his mom was dying. Like, it was around the time that his mom was dying and died, and a lot of things were going badly for him in that regard. And I don't know if anybody's had a parent that died or dealt with that, but it can be extremely stressful. For those of you psychopaths in the audience, when you're close with a family member, you have emotional feelings tied to that, and it can be painful when you have to let a loved one go. That's what was happening with him. A little peek behind the curtain there. That's why he was kicking the cabinets, slamming doors, and throwing glasses. Nothing at her. Obviously, she walked away without a mark on her. Even though he tried to grab the camera from her, he didn't pursue her and knock her down, even. She walked away and felt confident enough to smirk and leak that. Allegedly. I mean, obviously that is what happened. That guy who got it wasn't accused of stealing her camera, and nobody brought charges against anything or reported anything stolen that I'm aware of. So, obviously, they got a hold of that video somehow. Specifically. That bugs me a lot, because clearly it's just a narcissist or a psychopath or something in that realm with histrionic disorder. Accusing why? More fame, more money, the fear of losing the spotlight, just taking him for what he's worth. Once you get in the door, settle up and get out. I don't know. I can't understand it. Just live your lives, guys. And try to separate the real monsters from people who either have made mistakes that were obviously mistakes. Like, I think, who was it? Aziz Ansari had what he referred to as a tricky year that I don't remember the details of completely, but he was pretty open about it.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yeah, I actually believe his story.
I do too. Because he was so open about it and seemed contrite.
Yeah, because
that can be faked, but I do.
I don't think it is. I think he genuinely feels bad about the situation because he was just going based on the information he had, and if that information is bad information, because the person on the other end is telling him that, how's he supposed to know?
So, do you want to end on a light note or a dark note, or do you want to keep going for I don't know how long we've been. I don't. Okay, Louis C.K. Go.
All right. Maybe controversial on this one, but I want to preface that what he did was scummy, but I don't think it was anywhere on the level of what Harvey Weinstein was doing.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I don't think there's no allegedly with Harvey
because
Weinstein.
he's in jail. So I'm just
because was Louis C.K. what he doing scummy? 100%. Should he have done it? No, probably not. He should have been aware of that position of authority and abstained. But on the other hand, if he asks and you say yes, that's kind of on you a little bit because you are giving consent, and that's what his whole thing was about.
Yeah, that gets us into territory. Yeah. I probably shouldn't have said his name. That's a whole different thing that sucks because now I'm seeing stuff that's like consent doesn't mean consent. Like, it has to be gleeful and in writing, and there's people who we already have a nation of, I think autism might actually be on the rise, which means people are going to have in the future,
or at least the recognition.
the recognition. I actually, that could be. I'm not going to say I'm absolutely right on this, but I actually think that not just recognition of it in older people, so it's always been there, we just didn't recognize that some people were better at masking than others, but I think that it may actually be out there more. I don't know. I don't have any hard evidence of that because the numbers get skewed because of people getting a diagnosis later in life now, because that information is readily available to them and testing is more available, at least home testing, which could be accurate and could not be. So it's hard to say. I'm recognizing it more. Does that mean it's actually out there more? So you'd recognize something based on where you're at. Anyway, so with that, we have a lot of people that are having difficulty communicating with the advent of the iPhone, especially the intelligent internet phone. We have more texting, less communication, more of an ability to ghost somebody. Like, if your phone's ringing, you can hit a button. Back in the old days when it was landline, you couldn't. If somebody go knock on your door, you can pretend you're not home. That's a movie trope. People will do it. But more than likely, you'll just open the door and talk to people like we used to. I think there's less actual communication these days. Less actual emoting and relating to people, which if we all just sat down and had a conversation instead of trying to make sure we virtue signal so we all know we're on the same page and are good people, and we actually just talk and realize there's a lot more good in people than we're, I think, willing to accept generally. But this generation has the burden, and all generations now have the same situation with how things are currently, but there's certain younger generations that they've only known this way of life with the internet, TikTok, Twitter, the ability to not have to talk to people, that you can stay behind a screen and throw out whatever kind of message you want to send into the world or to your friends. And that's different. When you get in person, you don't have less developed social skills. I'll leave it at that. Some people are just naturally better at it than others. And if you have a spectrum disorder on top of that, it's going to make things incredibly difficult. And if we have people are already afraid to talk to people because of a lot of these situations where, I haven't been proud of everything I've ever done. I should have said no just to going out to a party some night because it was with the wrong people. And I just didn't have a good time. That's a low stakes version of what some of these other things, these high, like intense situations you get into where you feel like you should say no, but you're pressured to say yes. Or maybe that's just what you think. Or maybe it is what you want to do at the time. And then later you decide, I'm going to say that I wanted to say no, but I felt like I should say yes. This can happen to men and women. There may be more emphasis on men pressuring women, but all of these things that have happened do happen to men. And I just want to mention one other person, one last little instance that I think was a travesty of justice, because I feel like we've leaned heavily on men being monsters or whatever. And just to be fair to the women, I want to mention Kathy Griffin just before we leave. I don't agree with everything she says as a comedian. I don't think every comedy special that she's ever done is the most hilarious thing of all time. Generally, at least traditionally, she might have changed more recently, but she's more on the liberal spectrum and I am too. So we're pretty well aligned. At one point, she took a photo where she was holding up kind of like a mannequin head made to look like a certain presidential candidate. And then she got everything taken from her on. She couldn't go anywhere. She basically had no career for a very long time. I think she was investigated by the Secret Service. She's very open about this now. Cut to recently at a Republican convention, they set up like one of those, it's like from the waist up, like a punching, thick body sort of thing. You can punch on it to look like Biden, the current president, the incumbent presidential candidate from the opposing party. And people could just come up and take a whack at it. I honestly do not see the difference between the two events, but one of them did not get investigated by the Secret Service. One of them did not get shut down and is still allowed to take donations. The other one had their life totally destroyed for a time and maybe permanently. So just wanted to say, I don't know where we landed on this. I don't think we got any closer to solving this problem of
So I think closing statement to answer the question we posed at the beginning. Where do you draw the line? I think as with anything, that's up to the individual.
Yeah,
But
I think it's also different for every artist.
yeah. So I think you should make your own decision where you draw that line. At what point do you cut them off? But make sure that decision is informed and not based on the court of public opinion, because they're not always correct. There is no innocent until proven guilty there.
Yeah. So be a court unto yourself, but take in all the information available. And if you're really in doubt, dig deeper.
And if it's a musician, just listen to their stuff on Spotify, because it's basically stealing anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't even get into cults, but maybe some other time. We should definitely at some point after this one, after nobody listens to this and it gets the most dislikes, do a part 2.
Called the Pissing Everyone Off World Tour. But with that, I think we'll wrap up. If you made it with us this far, thank you. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, tell your friends, follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, see ya.